You are online, if you could put your video on, that would be great. If I could figure out how to put mine on, that would even be greater. I need Jason.
That's pressure.
Pressure. We all need Jason. Start video. Good morning, everyone. So nice to see you all today. And it was nice to see you last week. Here we are, many of us together again today. So I believe, Jennifer, we have quorum.
Yes, we do.
Thank you very much. The clerk has let me know that we have quorum, and we are now going to start the YouTube live stream. Is it started yet?
Yeah.
Yes, we're on. Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm Councillor Paula Fletcher. I'm chair of the Film, Television, Digital Media Advisory Board, and I'm here with co-chair Jason Mossick. And the clerk has confirmed we have quorum. I'd like to call meeting 3 of the board to order. It's being held with board members and staff participating both by video conference and in person at City Hall, and we're here in Committee Room 1 broadcasting live. Members of the public can also attend in person or on YouTube. Thank you, everybody, in advance for your patience for technical issues. So I will just give you a few reminders, asking members and staff to keep your microphones muted unless you have to answer a question or speak. Members, if you want to speak, raise your hand, unmute, just let me know. Don't be shy, but I don't think we need to worry about that. I'll also remind you, if you have motions on any of the agenda items, they must be submitted in writing, or you can email Jennifer to jennifer@ftdmb@toronto.ca. And although we're meeting in different locations and meeting remotely today, the board has to acknowledge the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It's also now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I now need a motion to confirm the minutes of the Film, Television, and Digital Media Board meeting held on March 1st, 2024. Jason, can you move that, please?
I will.
Moved by Jason. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. Members, we have 4 items on the agenda. They're in the following order. I'm going to ask to have the order changed because Pat Tobin's with us today and would like him to go first, but here they are. FB 3.1, update on reducing red tape to Build Homes Act. Bill 185, Jeff Cantos is the manager. City Planning, he's going to provide an update. As you know, it concerns employment lands. We'll come back to that one if you don't mind. And number 2, Infrastructure and Sustainability Working Group update, and Magali Smart will be presenting. Number 3, Creative Industries Consultation. Pat Tobin, the General Manager, Economic Development and Culture, will be here to present, take questions, and have a discussion about that Creative Industries Consultation so that our board can advise and hear it straight up and then give any feedback. And number 4 will be the staff updates. Film board staff, our fantastic staff, will make some updates. So those are the 4 items. What I just need to do is ask somebody to make a motion to reverse the order and have item number 3 go first, and that would be Cynthia Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much, members. Every single one of these is a held item. So I'll just ask Mr. Tobin, who you may or may not know, who's the General Manager, Economic Development, to join the board this morning.
Thank you very much, Chair. We'll just take a moment to get settled.
We'll give you a second to get all set up there.
Sure. Or do you want it? Here,
And accompanied by Jessica.
Counselor, could you move your mic a little closer? We're having trouble hearing you in the
You're
room.
having trouble hearing me? Oh, my God. Okay, I'll speak up too. All right, we're joined today by Pat Tobin, who is the General Manager of Economic Development and Culture Division at the City of Toronto, to start this conversation on creative industries, which I know people have been involved in, but we'd like to hear it directly and have a discussion. So thanks very much, Pat.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Fletcher as Chair. Very much appreciate the invitation. Great to meet many of you for the first time, some of you to get reacquainted. As Councillor Fletcher says, my name is Pat Tobin. I'm the General Manager of Economic Development and Culture for the City of Toronto. And I'll update you on actually 2 planning processes that are currently underway, heading to City Council in October of this year. But if you could advance, please, Jessica. Thanks. So just a quick overview of what we're talking about today. I'll talk about the strategies that are proceeding. So one is an economic development strategy, and the second is a cultural development strategy, commonly referred in Toronto to the Culture Plan. We'll recap the significant engagement on both fronts to date, with a focus on a creative industries town hall recently held, and other engagements with the film sector. We'll talk about what we're hearing as takeaways, and we'll take you through next steps and opportunities for the film board and sector more broadly to get engaged. Next slide, please. So the first thing to start is first, congratulations on what I understand to be a really successful mission to LA, and I've received a lot of feedback from our counterparts there about just how effective the advocacy was, so congrats. In the context of a culture plan which spans all of the areas of culture development in the City of Toronto. So that is heritage. We run 10 city museums, we have art centers, we do granting into the not-for-profit sector. We support the creative industries, film included, through Marguerite Pigot's shop. But film is the 500-pound gorilla in terms of its economic importance, and it therefore uniquely shows up both in the economic development plan and within the culture plan. And these are stats that you're intimately aware of, but worth repeating them here in terms of the economic importance and the labor footprint of your industry. Next slide, please. So with respect to how the city approaches its support to the film industry, it's very much driven by this board. So the current plan, which spans through to 2025, has those 5 key priorities, which translated very well into the advocacy strategy down in LA. But this is our blueprint in terms of what we do to support the industry in terms of effective advocacy in export markets, foreign direct investment attraction, studio expansion, greening in the industry, workforce development initiatives, film-friendly city, film-friendly planning. You'll hear from our colleagues in planning in a moment. But this is really the guiding strategic framework for how the city supports film. And I'll talk a bit about how it is referenced within the broader cultural plan. It is your plan, so you know it very, very well. But the XOTO, Spotlight on Toronto plan, dictates a number of programs that are led out of the film office, and Marguerite, Jessica, Colin, and team. I won't go into these in detail in the interest of time, but the culture plan, just to say, is an overarching document that in no way sort of dictates at this level the strategies and activities that the film board sets out for support by the city to the film industry. Next slide, please. In addition to the film strategy, I think, speaking briefly, our last culture plan was Creative Capital Gains, and that was 2011, so it was some time ago. And in that plan, it set out the creation of a film office and the film strategy. Subsequent to that, built on the gains that we've seen the office have for the industry as a whole, and you've heard this likely from Marguerite, we're beginning to model that approach through to sectors like music, in more recently interactive digital media, or creative tech, as we're increasingly calling it, and then sub-strategies to that, like the e-sports strategy that has probably been discussed here. So just a note to say that an overarching culture plan just provides a framework and the hooks, and a platform to go in and seek resources at City Council during the budget process that then feed a whole bunch of sector-specific plans. And next slide, please. I mentioned plans, so there at the top of this slide, you see both an action plan for Toronto's economy, as we're calling it, and an action plan for Toronto's cultural sector. With respect to the action plan for Toronto's economy, which is less actually the source of discussion today, film is very well represented. We've got Nisha Ali from Spin VFX is on our expert advisory panel. As film adjacent, Jeffrey Remedios from Universal is one of 25 panel members as well. And that's a panel that spans heavy industry, the tech sector, real property development, et cetera. So that plan, as noted, is out in consultation. I'd say we're at about 70% of the way through that process. And in parallel is an action plan for Toronto's culture sector, also coming through consultation, a few consultations left, about 70% through, and they go onward to the Economic Community Development Committee, September 18, and thereafter to Council in October. After they are passed by Council, there is a divisional strategy that sort of moves to a level of implementation with tactics built off of those strategies. Next slide, please. Really just spoke to this, where we are. We're at about the 70% point in terms of consultation and development. The consultation processes, the next slides are going to demonstrate, have been pretty broad. So the work over summer for the team really is one of aggregation, synthesis, writing the report, and a feedback loop with sectors and council. So the engagement, we've consulted over 4,000 individuals through a variety of mechanisms in the development of both of those plans. With respect to those communities that you'd be most interested in, creative industries have been engaged in multiple streams, be that these expert advisory panels I've spoken about, or creative industry specific town halls, one recently held with 200 plus participants, as well as engagement by our contractors at the Canadian Urban Institute on a creative industries roundtable. We benefit in this process, which has been underway now for about 9 months, by the support of organizations like the aforementioned Canadian Urban Institute, but we've got Deloitte and UT School of Cities also helping us with research, and monumental projects helping us with public engagement. Next slide, please. The most recent Creative Industries consultations, this was April 24, it was exclusively virtual. We had over 100 participants. The plurality of those were from the film sector. And I want to thank you, I understand from Marguerite that there were efforts made by members of the film board to drive engagement there. And we'll get into a bit what we heard, but this was focused in and around creative industries, IP intensive industries that are profit motivated and that have a role in the city in terms of creating jobs, and particularly in creating jobs for communities who perhaps traditionally have faced barriers to accessing jobs as pathway to the middle class. So that was sort of the framing we used. And then talk a little bit about what we heard, if we go to the next slide. Or sorry, so there's a few more opportunities for engagement. The City of Toronto periodically convenes town halls on culture. So it's an opportunity to just speak to the sector, again, writ large in terms of heritage stakeholders, not-for-profit sector, creative industries. Frankly, we see more of those latter two, former two. And we speak about things like the budget process, what the council direction the division has gotten that might relate to the cultural sector, work with other funders and other orders of government. And in that context, we'll touch on the culture plan on June 20. We're going to do it at the Phoenix Concert Hall. We have upcoming roundtables in both Etobicoke and North York. In Etobicoke, particularly be interesting to engage with the film sector, and we are leaning on colleges as our partners in developing the invite list and the facilitation for these events. Just concluded actually a successful one Monday this week in Scarborough in conjunction with Centennial College, and for the film sector, Ravi Jain was out from Birchmount Studios and had an opportunity to weigh in on the needs of studios, particularly in the development of that plan. Next slide, please. So briefly, what we've heard in terms of the engagement on the culture plan is that there is pressure on domestic cultural producers, and this is issues around affordability that we are hearing across the board, be that space, housing, labor inputs, et cetera. Competing priorities, the film sector and Councillor Fletcher have been clear about the primacy of film within the cultural industries and the need for it to occupy the space it needs and to have the autonomy at this table and the board, as the culture plan does need to contend with other stakeholders as well. Broader citywide challenges, congestion, transit, workforce development, attraction, and retention of that workforce as well. What job gaps look like, thinking back to the Nordicity study that you undertook now a few years ago. As the city's approach to workforce development due to changes in the provincial government becomes much, much more targeted, continue to have a focus in on specific gaps in the film sector and an equity focus such as your strategy in this office has brought. And then your career pathways, speaking a bit about that. Continuing on, and I'll try to wrap up quickly in respect to your time, continue to invest in Toronto's diverse workforce, a bit of continuation there. Support local and domestic production. We're very proud, for example, of the competitive advantage that the film, Bobby's work at the film office and the turnaround standard that we've established there, which was probably the best in the industry, but continue to be as effective as possible in the provision of supports to the sector, continue to advocate within the city with colleagues such as in planning, in buildings around the needs of the film industry, and embed sector needs within infrastructure. So the $10 million, I think, initiated when Magali was here with power drops being put into those parks with the most location shooting in the city. I need to expand on that as we continue efforts to green the industry as well. And so those are the main things that we are hearing. Again, we're at about 70%. Would value any input that folks may have here. There is always opportunities. We are continuing to organize some roundtables, but we are open to receiving input in whatever manner works for you. I'm accompanied, in addition to Jessica, Ben McIntosh is our policy manager effectively on the culture side and is here as well to answer any questions you may have and is a good resource for any follow-ups. But that's everything we wanted to cover today, but we're happy to take any questions that you may have.
There we go. Thank you very much for being here this morning, Pat. And sorry, Cynthia. Yes, Cynthia Lynch, Film Ontario.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Pat, for the presentation. I appreciate that you've noted that there are more opportunities for input. I think on both the economic development plan and the culture plan, sorry, I'm using my own short terms, it's really unclear how this board will get to have some concrete input into drafts or anything that's going to council before that happens. So can you expand on that? And I don't know if there's like a mailing list I need to sign up for, or like how do we make a substantive contribution to that?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Cynthia, and through the chair to you. So this is our second trip through to this committee on the culture plan. I think we are able to circulate, we are in the process of aggregating all the information and synthesizing it and pulling it into a form that we could provide to you as a board virtually, perhaps in the run-up to the next meeting, and solicit additional feedback. As that is coming together on the dev side, particularly, we're hearing a lot about Toronto needing to be a little bit bolder, both in its promotion of itself as a jurisdiction for the visitor economy, for foreign direct investment attraction, talent attraction, but also that within that context, the city needs to be clear about high growth sectors that it wants to deliberately champion, and creative industries and film particularly continues to come back to us along with tech, AI within it, clean tech, and med tech. But those are really the priorities that are emerging. So it'll show up while we do not have that all written out yet, this is what we're hearing, and there will be some very good hooks, and we'll be able to come back to you. I'd suggest that we would do so prior to your next meeting to give you something to respond to.
So is there an opportunity before you get to the drafting stage to provide additional input, or would that be the next opportunity?
I'll work with the chair in the way that works best for the committee. What we find in terms of consultations is it's best that we give you something to respond to, but if you would like to do so in a more open-ended fashion, we're here to work with how you'd like to work with us.
Okay. Others? Questions? Comments? Are you suggesting that, Cynthia? I'm getting the impression that this is your second time, but you're here because we didn't understand what was going on the first time. So let's not count the first time, okay? Let's start now. And I think generally from what I've heard, it's just odd that the framing for the film conversation never came here as a framing conversation. So that's a miss as far as I'm concerned. So how do we fix that in the materials that you've got? Timing-wise, I hear you're going to economic development in the fall. This board doesn't meet all that often. I'm assuming that we should kind of fix this, that either you have a board that has input or you're giving input to a board and making decisions, and I'm unclear which is your model. It would be helpful to understand that.
So what I'd suggest is, why don't, over the next couple of weeks, as we wind up this consultation and we begin to pull together that information into the key themes that we're hearing on both sides and certain specific actions that this broad consultation is suggesting, we give that to you and ensure that film is adequately represented, and we can do so either through an ad hoc meeting of a subset of this group, which didn't challenge the quorum rules, or electronically with the group as a whole. But also to...
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you repeat that, because this is kind of important?
Sure. In the next couple of weeks, we will be able to pull together the key themes that we are hearing in both of these two plans, as well as what we are hearing from the public in the industry consultation with respect to specific actions. And we can filter, we can zero in on film, and if you'd like, adjacent industries in the creative industries in Toronto as well, and give that to you to respond, and I'm just looking to Ben, respond to, I would suggest, in about 3 weeks. Yeah.
So that could be something at the July meeting then, or we're thinking about that. If that material's there, we also have some working groups. But I'd just like to know how it got so far without a framing advice from this board, which is the city's board.
Well, I'll take that away as something that we could have done better. I think the intention was, when staff last came through, that they were trying to establish a conversation around the needs of film within the context of the plan. But clearly we didn't hit the mark, so we have time now to make sure that we hit the mark.
I understand. I'm just being clear. The framing for the consultation should have come here. And so I can't write a motion because I have to have my screen up here. So otherwise, I may do so at some point here once we have the next piece. But I just would say thank you. You're saying 3 weeks, you'll have materials. It will come to the film board or a working group of the film board, however that's established. And Jessica, I know you're keeping notes there. And look at, I think, overall, there can be an overall comment on the process. I think there may be some comments on the process that should be heard, and then comments on where things are at based on how we're working. And I hear you, I thought somebody came to tell us what was happening, and this is why we're having this conversation, because there was some disquiet about how you put it all together, to be just clear about that. So let's continue. It's great to have you here this morning to continue this conversation.
Great. Thank you very much for the invitation and a chance to talk it through, and we'll keep engaging with you on it.
Does anyone else have anything here before we move to our next round? No? Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for being here. We'll move to receive that, and we'll just see if there's anything more to come out. Thanks very much, Pat. Next up is, oh, sorry, move to receive. Cynthia Lynch moving to receive. Pat, if I can have 1 second with you. And then next item up is going to be, we'll go back to our regular agenda. So we've done item 3. We're going on to item 1, which is updating on reducing red tape to build Homes Act, which actually has quite a bit on employment land. So Jeff Cantos is here. Thank you very much. And Jason, I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the board. My name is Jeff Cantos, the manager of the official plan and legislation within city planning. And we were asked to come and give you an update on new, recently introduced provincial changes. Next slide, please. So we'll give you the update on the provincial changes in legislation and land use policies with a spin on how they intersect with the film industry. And we'd also like to explain some of the city's responses and our actions to address some of these changes. Next slide, please. So on April 10th, just last month, the province released legislative and policy changes with a 30-day window for stakeholders, including the city, to provide comments. And what they introduced through Bill 185 is the Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act, which affected 17 different provincial pieces of legislation, including the Planning Act, the City of Toronto Act, Development Charges Act, and others. The province also reintroduced a new proposed provincial planning statement, and the PPS, the provincial planning statement, is a guiding document that all land use decisions in the province must be consistent with. And in introducing this document, they also repealed the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And the growth plan is it is a regional plan that applies to the Greater Toronto GTHA, Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, that helps guide regional growth and prevent sprawl. So that was repealed. And the province also introduced a new minister's zoning order framework. So I'll take you through some of the highlights because it's a pretty big package of policy and legislative changes, but I'll take you through some highlights. So we, city staff in multiple divisions, prepared a report on our comments that we went to Planning and Housing Committee I believe it was last week, and we took all these changes proposed by the province and put it into thematic buckets: housing and development approvals, economic development and employment lands, infrastructure and development charges, regional planning and the environment, and implementation. And we submitted them with a slew of attachments as well to the different ministries at the province to say, here are our comments, our concerns, and recommended revisions before it gets enacted by the province. And the rest of the presentation, I think, focuses on number 2 and a little bit of number 1. So one item that's not directly related to the film industry but has an indirect effect is the province is proposing to limit third-party appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So land use decisions that municipalities can make are able to be appealed to, for the lack of a better term, like a planning court, the Ontario Land Tribunal. So in removing third-party appeals, neighbors or other industry who object to a development that a municipality approves can no longer appeal it to the tribunal. And so our comments to the province was that we do not support this proposed change, as it can restrict appeal rights for certain groups, including industries who may be affected by a nearby sensitive residential land use to the operations of said industry. So, for example, if you're a manufacturer and you are emitting odors or noise, and a municipality approves a residential tower nearby, and if there's complaints from that newly built residential tower that was approved, that industry who's emitting odors or noise couldn't be able to appeal the municipality's decision for that approval. And so the province is proposing to remove that ability for third-party appeals. So appeals can be lodged by the applicant and what's called specified persons, basically like the utilities, First Nations, and the city, and municipalities. So again, the city's position was that we do not support this proposal. Fee refunds. I think it was last year or the year before, the province introduced Bill 109, which imposed a punitive measure that requires municipalities to refund development application fees to applicants if the municipality hadn't made a decision in a specified time period. And that required us, the city, to revise our operations and our practices. And it included financial risk to the city. But so the proposed changes is to eliminate the application fee refunds, so that application fees can be wholly used by the city to support the review of the development application. So the city supports this change. The province, through the new provincial planning statement, is proposing to eliminate municipal comprehensive reviews. So municipal comprehensive reviews are the opportunity for a municipality to review its official plan comprehensively citywide, and it can only happen as the city initiates it. And it's the only time in which a municipality can also consider employment area conversion requests. And that's when a landowner with lands on the purple lands on the map can request that the municipality introduce, for example, residential uses on those lands. So that could only happen during an MCR, a municipal comprehensive review, but with the elimination of MCRs, those employment area conversion requests could happen anytime. The city does not support this proposal, as the city believes, we believe that MCRs provide a level of land use certainty to industries like yours, that nearby residential could only be considered at a certain interval as opposed to any time. So we do not support this proposed change. The new PPS, the Provincial Planning Statement, also reintroduces a new definition of employment area. So employment areas are defined in the PPS as well as in the Planning Act, and the definition essentially, the new definition removes certain uses from being an employment area, including commercial, retail, and office and other institutional uses. So employment areas, by definition in the province of Ontario, would be scoped down to manufacturing, industrial, processing, and other type of those uses. And associated office, like the HR office to an industry, would be permitted, but a standalone office would not. Associated retail would be permitted, so if you're making couches, you can sell your couches, but a store that just sells couches would not be permitted. And so that new definition has some impacts across the city, and on the map it shows the multiple different businesses today that could be negatively affected by the new definition. Land use compatibility changes. So there's new policies that the city does not support that requires municipalities to permit sensitive land uses on lands intended to serve the buffer between residential and what we call noxious land uses, those lands that can accommodate industries that may emit smells, odor, noise. And so the potential impacts here is that it could increase, again, the land use conflict between potential residential use and an industry that, again, emits odors, noise, and smells. And the city does not support this policy change. As I mentioned, the new employment areas definition has changed. And so in red are the uses in Toronto's official plan, our employment areas, that would no longer meet the provincial definition of employment areas. And the city has taken the position that uses related to the film production industry fall under the category of manufacturing or processing for the purposes of this policy in the city and in the province, so that the film industry would be considered an area of employment. So we have explicitly told the province and have explicitly put in our report that because the land use permissions for film production uses have always been permitted in our areas of employment, our position is that it will continue to be so. So some actions we're taking at the city. So we, as in all other municipalities, we must change our definitions to align with the province's new definition. And by doing so, this allows the municipalities to apply what we call conversion or removal tests. So if someone applies to introduce a residential use on an employment area, there are certain tests that we, the city, and the proponent must demonstrate they pass. If they fail, then the municipality can deny that request. And so by changing our definition, we are able to apply those tests. If we don't change the definition, those tests are not applicable. As well, in order for us by us changing our policies to meet the provincial definition, council's decisions on that conversion or removal would not be subject to appeal. If we didn't change our policies to align, council's decisions could be appealed to the planning court, the Ontario Land Tribunal. So this is an action that we're taking to ensure that council's decisions are sheltered from appeal, and we can apply those tests. 2 more slides. The next action we are taking is that we are transitioning, in the words of the province use, lawfully established uses. So the province, although they are changing the policies, they've allowed municipalities to acknowledge existing uses that are lawfully established, that are there and operating, or that have their permissions. And so by doing so, it provides a little bit of land use certainty that by us changing our policies to include this transition, again, we can apply those tests, and council's decisions would not be subject to appeal. So these are the policy tools that the province has given us for us to do as much as we can to protect our employment areas and the industries that are operating within them. And that's the actions we're taking. And we'll be going to council shortly on that. And thank you. And happy to take any of the board's questions.
Thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Cynthia?
I feel like I have all the questions today. Thank you very much for the presentation, Jeff. So I have two sort of things that I would like to understand better. So first of all, you said that you have submitted to the province that it is the city's understanding that film and TV falls under the definition of manufacturing. Have you had any reaction to that, to the extent that you can share with us?
Through the Vice Chair, thank you for the question. We've made it in our written submissions. We've spoken to ministry staff that this is our understanding, and I know that there has been communications from our colleagues at ministry staff to other ministries to say that this is the city's definition. But no, we haven't received any reaction from the province, but we are going to hold firm on our interpretation.
So they haven't said no.
They haven't said yes either. So no reaction.
We're going with glass half full here. And then can you explain this idea of the tests a little bit more clearly, and particularly, I think, for this group, how that helps us protect some of those employment lands that, our studio zones are based in. So if I understand correctly, if the city develops a test for evaluating conversion requests and makes a decision to, I'm assuming, turn down a conversion of employment lands is usually where it goes, then that conversion would not be subject to appeal. Did I understand that correctly?
Through the Vice Chair, we do have tests in our official plan, and there's a number of them. One of the, I think the most relevant one to the film industry is land use and compatibility. So the proponent who wants to introduce residential nearby has to demonstrate that nearby industries would not negatively impact the residential or be negatively impacted by the nearby residential. So there's studies that need to be done, noise studies, vibration studies on either side, and information shared and peer-reviewed so that the city staff can make a recommendation to city council to say, we've looked at it, we've done a deep dive on land use compatibility, and A, we think it's compatible or can be mitigated or not. And then it helps informs our recommendation to city council, and city council's decision on the, or non-decision, if the city council decides not to, city council doesn't make a decision, then that would not be subject to appeal to the tribunal.
And when those are conversions that are related to employment lands in when those are applications related to conversions in areas that are studio related, the opportunity for the industry to comment on those is when they go to planning and housing?
That would be one of the last opportunities. Throughout the process, we city staff would engage with, and together with our economic development colleagues, would consult with nearby industries. We do, members of my team, members of economic development, meet with nearby industries to ask what are the potential impacts, so we can, get boots on the ground to find out. So there's multiple moments of engagement, not just at the end where Planning and Housing Committee considers it.
Can I ask a question? Just a question. What would be helpful? The city has long assumed that film was a manufacturing because it was added into the industrial zoning in the studio district many, many years ago. So I'd say that's a baseline, and I'm sure we have, that research has been done now. It's been found, that rezoning or that inclusion of film as a light manufacturing industry. Have you found that yet?
Through the chair, yes, we can confirm it, and we have included half a page in our report to the province citing that zoning bylaw, that there's a long-standing permission, nothing is changing, so we continue to interpret it as such.
And that we've also created zones in the Portlands that are particular to film production, which manufacturing, distribution, everything.
That's correct.
So how can this board and these members help nail that down, that long-standing zoning admission that this industry is part of industry side, not a offside to employment lands? Is there anything, we may have that conversation here, what more could happen, but I don't know what the entry points are and how that folks could be more helpful to clarify that.
Through the chair, I think the sheer fact that the committee invited us to come and speak about this, about these changes, is the right step to continue to be informed, to continue to be engaged, and to understand what's happening around your neighborhoods, and to be engaged in those development applications nearby that could potentially negatively impact your operations. So from a policy macro perspective, we, city staff and city council, have taken the position that these lands and these industries should be protected and preserved given the economic input that they add to the city. Again, that's from the macro, the citywide perspective, but from on the ground, when But when proposals are introduced for sensitive land uses nearby, is when, the folks on the ground can be activated to help implement council's
Yes, but doesn't your report on a trajectory of some kind?
Sorry, Councilor?
Isn't your report on a trajectory of some kind, or is it just a submission to the province?
It went to Planning and Housing last week, but because it closed May 10th, we submitted to the province, but we are still bringing the report to next week's City Council. And any comments received at City Council, we will submit to the province as supplementary. So we gave them the heads up that given their timing, there was no time to go to City Council, but we still are. So if there's additional information at City Council, we will forward it to the province.
And do you have that paragraph by any chance with you today that describes the early zoning
The report?
on Eastern Avenue?
I will email it to you. Yes, I do.
You do, so we could circulate that to the board,
I will.
and I think it's important. Might want to do something here today with, confirm that. Thank you. John Jenkins, you want to ask some questions? Oh, sorry. There. Jason's sharing.
Sorry, Joan?
I just wanted to get a sense of what the timeline is. I don't know if that's been covered by the questions already asked, but it seems like it's a very important issue. But what is the timeline for the bill to be passed, and what kind of influence can what you've done have on those decisions?
Thank you for the question. Through the Vice Chair, my understanding of the province's timeline is that the bill is at their standing committee. It was there yesterday, it's there tomorrow. So it's just at a committee before it goes to their legislature for royal assent. And royal assent is when it kind of comes into effect. And so I do not know when it will come. I do not know when it will go back to the legislature for royal assent. But speculating that, I do know that the legislature takes their summer recess mid-June. So it's either going to be before mid-June or September 5th when they rise again. After September 5th, sorry. So I'm not sure. Sorry, I can't answer that question. In the report? Control F film.
Sorry, Joan, go ahead.
Which report is it? Go to the supplementary report.
I think you're muted.
See, scroll down, City Council.
I just wanted to understand, the reducing the red tape is, our overall position is, let's not reduce the red tape, generally speaking.
Through the chair, there are multiple aspects of the bill that the city supports. For example, the removal of the fee refunds. There's a couple other minutia type changes that the city does support, but there are other pieces of the legislation that we do not support. So of course the city is determined to accelerate and expedite approvals and be more efficient, but there are some times when you make a change, there are unintended consequences that we want to raise to the province that they may not have thought of, but we experience on a day-to-day. So, yes, reduce red tape, but not delivering unintended consequences.
Can I jump in here, Joan, just to clarify a few things about, we're really talking about employment lands, those lands set aside for industry, and we'd asked that when the province brought forward the changes that they're bringing forward, whatever they call, they all have a name for every bill, but that we asked that we designate film as one of the uses for employment so that it would be protected in these zones that are set aside for employment. There's 17 of them in the city. And while they haven't specifically done that, what the city staff are doing is looking at how the city, early city of Toronto, zoned lands, upzoned or changed the zoning to include film as a manufacturing use. So basically, we're confirming for us, the city side, that film is part of a manufacturing district, part of an employment district. So it needs to be protected. This bill will protect certain uses from being converted to residential in order to maintain a strong economy. We need film to be included. They haven't directly included it, but this is what we're talking about, that we consider it's there. They might not. And the issue really is there any opening now for anybody to maintain a little bit of conversation, pressure, and maybe Cynthia, you could give us a better idea of how to have that conversation, if there is anybody that can have that provincially. So when it's done, when they pass the bill, the understanding is that it includes Atlantic packaging, it includes glass, it also includes film in an employment area. So somebody can't come in and say, well, I'm going to take that film studio and I'm going to put 800 houses on it. It needs to remain as an important part of the economy. So that's the conversation that we've had quite a bit on this board around conversions. So this is our latest foray into the conversions discussion with city staff. And I hope that's helpful in understanding why we're having this here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pardon me? Oh, yeah, I just think, you have the paragraph? Do you want to put the paragraph up? But really, it's how can we help you, because it's going through the city process. It's also going through a provincial process. I don't think we're going to have a big problem at the city. How can we help make sure that at the provincial side, that everybody understands that film is an integral part of our employment districts? And there's the paragraph up there.
So, Councillor, maybe since you're asking a way that could support this committee's mandate, is a letter to City Council on the item that then we city staff could submit to the province as supplementary information.
Well, the board can't, sorry, Jason, the board cannot send a direct letter because we have to report up in a different way, unfortunately.
To staff then?
Oh, but I don't even know if we can send a direct letter to staff, but it could be sent by a number of members of the board to, and I think I'd just ask if that's an idea, if that's what you'd like, that could be done in that way.
Through you, the chair, yeah, it can be done that way because that is a conduit for which the letters from the industry can go directly to the province, as we will send supplementary information to the province.
Looking at Cynthia to see if that's something that, and everybody, since you're Film Ontario, sorry, or Jason, you're the chair.
Yeah, look, I'll send that over to Jason. No, so just a question is, can you send the link around to this document so we can quote it first thing? So if I have an understanding, you're asking us or suggesting that it might be helpful if we went back to our separate organizations to request a letter to City Council supporting the position that you have taken on this issue. Is that what you're asking?
As it relates to film, yes.
Okay. Yes. I have no opinion on the other things. I have no opinion on selling couches. So I guess to answer your previous question, Councillor, we have just recently reached out to Minister Calandra's office for clarification on this issue as well. I'm in the same boat, I think, as city staff. I haven't heard either yes or no. So can certainly keep people, staff at the film office in the loop on what we hear about that, and they can pass that on. But I think we're kind of both in a hurry up and wait section on that. And we did, Film Ontario, along with several other organizations, the DGC, NABET, I think CineSpace, did make submissions to the original consultation on the policy statement, just highlighting the importance of including film production in the manufacturing definition. So, pardon?
Which they didn't do. So
They neither did nor didn't.
I think what
So I think we're just
staff is
waiting to get that
saying is
clarification,
We're just
yeah.
assuming, because it's always been there, that that's what we're assuming. But I think crafting that letter isn't a bad idea. And then I don't think it's individuals, I think it would just be board, if everybody can or not. It could be good for studios to do that, actually. So I don't know how we can take that away. Where's Jessica? There you are there. Is that something, you think that would be helpful? Jeff, yes?
I think it's one way that the members of this board can articulate their thoughts clearly on this particular item, that then staff can take carriage to forward to the province. I think it's one good way, yes.
Yeah, it is next Tuesday, but okay. How do you want to do that?
Does anybody else have any other thoughts, comments? I mean, I think it would be, sorry, go ahead, Cynthia. Oh, sorry, I thought you raised your hand. I mean, I think it would be helpful if people could do that. I mean, I think particularly dealing with employment lands, you know, I'd look to the unions and guilds that could be, perhaps be a voice in that, since it's our members who are directly engaged on those lands that would be impacted by some of these conversion requests, should land be taken away that we are currently utilizing. Cynthia and I can talk about from Ontario, obviously doing a letter to support that as well, or clarify that, lend our voice to that. Yeah, any other thoughts or Councillor?
Yeah, if that can happen, but I think it's helpful for you to assist with, give some talking points or some draft points, so we're just on message, in particular that the city's definite, it's always been that way. So maybe they didn't need to put it in because it's just assumed, which I'm assuming that's the case. And I didn't see the actual draft of the original change to zoning to establish the film industry and employment area. Is it actually in there?
The actual zoning bylaw change was not in the report, but we can provide that. We didn't put the exact, but we talked about it. at the
Context of that, yes. Maybe perhaps you could, yes, let's continue on that one and get everybody something if they want to put something in, or I'll sign it. Maybe.
That'd be helpful.
Thank you.
I think there's a question from Angela Masternardi online.
Thanks, Jason. I cannot figure out how to raise my hand on WebEx. I'm so sorry. I just want clarification. Is this in addition to the letter that we've already, like IATSE 873 has sent a letter to back in July of last year, stating what our position was on the proposed policies, and just wondering if this was in addition to the letter that we've already sent, basically just following up on what Cynthia had said.
Sorry, Angela, just the July letter you referenced that 873 sent, who was that to? Was that to the province or to the city or?
To the province.
So through the Vice Chair.
Land use.
Sorry.
Well, actually, I CC'd a heck of a lot of people. If you'd like to know who everyone I CC'd.
Through the Vice Chair, that letter was related to the province's proposal last year. And then a year later, they've reintroduced it with minimal changes and not responding to some of the letters that were submitted last year. So here it is again. So it could be the same letter with a different date because it's the same issue unaddressed.
This letter isn't to the province, it's to City Council, who's now looking at the response to the provincial legislation. And I think the kind of gist of it, so we're really clear, is not to say, why did you leave that out? But the city understands that this is part of manufacturing and has always understood that. So we're just confirming that's the understanding. That's why I would like Jeff to create some points for letters, because I think the tone of it is very important here. It's a new stage, Angela. getting closer to the end. So if that's helpful, I think between planning and film office, Jason and myself, we can get something out to people. Yes? Okay.
Thank you. Cynthia, go ahead.
Okay, so we've gone around a few times. I just want to make sure I'm abundantly clear, because these letters were already done. So now we're going to do a similar letter, if not identical, but it goes to the city.
No, I want to be really clear.
Yes.
Last year was asking the province, when they're doing their review of employment lands, please make sure film is a distinct use in the sacrosanct employment lands where you can't just automatically convert. They didn't put that in. They came back with all these uses. Manufacturing is a use, distribution is a use. They did not specifically pull out film and put it in. And those letters were to the province to develop this legislation. The city's now commenting on that legislation, sending back what our response to that. This is good, this is bad, this is whatever. City council will make that decision. So the underscoring that for the city and for the film folks in the city, we understand that while they might not have isolated that use as a film use in employment lands that you can't convert, that our understanding is it's covered already under manufacturing. So it's a little different. It's not the same letter. Quite a different letter. Well, thanks for your work. This is what we say. It's covered under manufacturing and distribution. It always has been in the city of Toronto. So we're just going to assume that that's how you're taking care of the film industry, by leaving it where it is in all of our zoning, in all of our employment zoning. So it's a different frame, actually, which is why if Jeff can help with that, then I think it's a good idea to send things into City Council so they can have that sent. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you for the clarity, Councillor.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Sorry? Joan. Oh, sorry, Joan.
I think we should go beyond this is our understanding and be explicit in what we're saying, rather than keeping it, because that sounds like it keeps it a bit ambiguous, as opposed to let's explicitly say that we want it included in the language.
That they've already given us the language. So their bill is pretty well cooked. Only trying to get the powers there to say that, yes, it covers, in their understanding, it also covers it. We're past them, we're past the 1159 call to the governor. I would have to from the governor. Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that gives you assurances, though.
There is no real assurance. There's just staking out a very big position.
Mm-hmm.
I wish it was. I wish it was easy to do that. We're picking our way through a bit of a minefield here, Joe. Right?
What's the deadline for this letter?
Sorry, what was that, Angela?
So sorry, I'm sorry for just jumping in. What is the deadline for this letter? I thought I heard something about next week.
Yes.
Or am I, maybe I misheard.
Through the chair, council. Through the chair, council is next week, Wednesday, May 22, 23, 24. So preferably before the 22nd of May.
What item is it, Jeff? I'd say by, come in.
PH 12.7 is my guess.
PH 12.7. I can make that on the Thursday. I can hold that to Thursday. And unless the mayor's doing it, in which case it'd be good to have them in for Wednesday. we'll send something out from Jeff to all the board members, and then you can take it from there. Does that work for everybody? Yep. Okay, great. Any other, sorry, Jason.
No, I was just hand the chair back to you. Any other questions, comments? I guess we get a motion to receive the report.
I might just say one more thing before we do it, because there's many new members, and this board has relentlessly fought to maintain employment lands everywhere. And we've been to many consultations, we've done so many things, basically to keep studios intact, including last year when we had to go full out for an Etobicoke piece of land. That basically, once you start converting one piece, then it unravels everything, including the film uses. So studios being so important to the industry, we want to, and we just want to make sure that they are not converted, or it's not easy to say, I want to get rid of that studio, I'm going to put something else here. So it's a land use issue that we have our working group on infrastructure that has many, many, many times had to weigh in on keeping the film industry intact, particularly the studio base. And that's why some of us have already been through this many, many times, and some of you are new. So I just thought we should just bring you up to date, and maybe at some point it would be helpful to have that bigger discussion. I'll leave that up to you. Magali chairs that committee as to whether or not it's helpful to just have that overview for all of the film board members. But it is part of the strategic plan that we'll be reviewing, part of the creative industries, if we have a chance to weigh in, and the importance of sites and maintaining them and the stability of the film industry. It's considered one of the big three, besides tax credits, being able to make sure that people know they have a space. So that's been one of our roles as a board. Just FYI, thank you.
Thank you for that. Now, I guess, can we get a motion to receive the report? Is that the proper? Matt, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Next up on our agenda, we have, fittingly enough, an update from Magali on Infrastructure Sustainability Working Group. And I'll also hand the chair back to Councilor Fletcher. Go ahead, Magali.
Thank you. So the infrastructure subcommittee met about 3 weeks ago. We met with Create TO, specifically Scott Pennington, Paul Archelander, and Colin Wolfe from City Planning, and the film office was, of course, in attendance. Just to remind people, because these are the first sort of like go at these, on that group is myself, Samantha Lee, Greenspark Group, John Rackage, location manager, Sarah Farrell at Pinewood, Peter Bajaj at Dufferin Gate, and Cynthia Lynch at Film Ontario. So that meeting for us was very precise. It was not the all-encompassing infrastructure and sustainability topics. It was about the McCleary district. So if you'll remember, at our previous large board meeting, Creatio came to present the sort of overview of what the plan was for the district that's long been discussed, and obviously the preoccupation in the area for film being so significant in that zone. So to remind anyone, the McCleary district is just under 50 acres of land. It will become a new mixed-use community, which means, in this case, residential and commercial zonings. The geographical boundaries of that, in case you forgot, is Don Roadway to the west, Commissioners Street to the south, Lakeshore Boulevard to the north, and Logan Avenue to the east. So obviously a key piece of land for any of us. The film office since then now has bi-weekly meetings with Creatio and planning on this, and we'll meet again in June as a subgroup with Creatio one more time before they come back to present how they've integrated our recommendations and thoughts around the district at our June board meeting. So the topics that were discussed, or the salient points really, is the various usages and the sort of breaking down of them, of commercial and residential, the city's need that we all understand to increase residential units in the area, as well as attract employment, the types of streetscapes and structures, and that can mean height or positioning within that large quadrant of the city that are envisioned for it. For us specifically, as a group, it's really how to best support and complement a thriving film industry in the Portlands and the East End generally, and really ultimately avoid an impediment to it. So the city does not necessarily control, or none of us control, whether these future commercial endeavors or light industrial endeavors in the area will be film related, but in a way, our recommendations point to not impeding what we have going in the area and hopefully attract some film business to that new piece of land in the commercial sort of parts of it. It's one of the greatest cluster we have, so as a result of this conversation, we came up with 5 sort of major overarching points as recommendations or preferences for the working group, and I guess on behalf of the board, and we can discuss that after. But one to them was, and by the way, McCleary, like, it's 50 acres of land. There's currently not much on those lands. Some of it will stay, some of it will go, but there's a lot of new there's empty slates there. And this is like the decades ahead. It's not like these buildings that we're all imagining are in the next 2 to 5 years. It's kind of a longer planning. So on building heights, we saw the sort of renderings about the types of buildings and height that will be sort of possible in the area. And the concern around heights for us is always in areas near studios is the privacy of operations. So overlooking after the 10th floor, you basically see down what's going on. So our recommendation around that was to have building heights decrease as they get closer to commissioners and to Lakeshore, so around 30 Booth and around Pinewood, and have the tallest buildings in the sort of center of that piece of land so that there's less onlooking possible. Support for film workers being preferred residents of new affordable housing in the McCleary area. Councillor Fletcher has been huge on that for the area. We understand there's more for it. I think we all want to see the film industry continue to live in that area, but they have to be able to also afford the area to be nearby. This is a big one. It's support film-friendly features throughout the area as defined in the urban design guidelines. Some of you may remember this is like many years in the making. A lot of people on Zoom worked on defining those. I'm not going to go through all of them, but film-friendly features in a nutshell become the real crux of whether an area works or doesn't work for film. So in this case, it's street furniture, where it's placed, whether it's removable, bike lane placements, huge, parking access, whether it's on the street or at building parkings. In our case, over the years, certainly access to grid power to reduce diesel generators. So in a case like this, it's often about, yes, you want businesses of film to go establish themselves in those areas, you want people to live there, but you also want location shoots to be able to happen in any new development. There was the very cool question of public art, which is always discussed in new parts of town or old parts of town too, and a proposal on our end is that given the importance of film and TV in the area and the city really owning its sort of point of pride around having a lot of the media world here, is that the public art in the McCleary district could be film art. So an indicator that this is a big film town and certainly a big film area. So we think this is a pretty cool thing to put forward. Have some ideas, but a couple of pieces of art I would like to put forward. And then the fifth piece on that, and kind of works, I guess, in the film-friendly features here, but we put it separately, is that if there's going to be a lot of residential there, to put what is called, sorry, I forget the term, the agent of change principles in basically real estate lease agreements, so that basically you sign up to live there. You have to kind of know and nod that you're aware that there might be a lot of film activity at all times of night, that there's trucks, that there's location shows that will be, in fact, encouraged to go in the area. So although this might not be an implementable thing on a resident per resident basis, it's something that sort of puts a blanket on an acknowledgement from the city's perspective that if you're gonna live there, you know, we're here for it. So those were the 5. Certainly can open to this floor and people on Zoom if major pieces would have been forgotten, but that was the approach for us on McCleary. They take all of this back, they meet with us one more time, and then they would come back to all of us to see how that cool film public art is being guaranteed at our June board meeting.
Thank you for that, Magali. Is that a realistic timeline? That our next meeting's July 7th, 5th? 5th,
Right.
sorry. Is that,
Yep, I think that's what we're asking for sure.
right, okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Magali? Sure, go ahead, Matt.
Wonderful work, and thank you so much for having the subcommittee to go over it. I'm just wondering in the subcommittee if you guys discuss any provisions for local or domestic production. Obviously, it's exciting whenever the big US studios come to town, but the reality is a lot of these new high-end studios are exclusively used by studios that can pay for it, but love the just rationale around anything domestic or maybe Canadian content related.
Thanks, Matt. I mean, others can answer this, certainly not just me. For McCleary per se, we currently do not expect necessarily a studio space to go on that land, so that would not apply to that. But these are questions that certainly came up when Basin went up for an RFP. What is the investment on the part of the American owner-developer to do for the local workforce? Not so much which content's going to go in it, but others might have comments on that. In this case, there's no provisions for domestic, given that there's currently no studio development planned for it. But it's a good topic to bring to this subcommittee. I agree.
No, and sorry, just absolutely. I mean, it's a huge component, and it obviously specifically ties into the conversation we just had about preserving the employment lands as well, because a lot of those sorts of buildings that exist on those types of lands are the types of buildings that domestic productions particularly will inhabit throughout the city, particularly in the Portlands. And as Councillor Fletcher mentioned, the parcel of land in Etobicoke where that was previously up for debate. So I don't disagree. I think we all agree that it is incredibly important and a focus that we should always be paying attention to. I think, as Magali said, McCleary though is just development, and so the process is to ensure that what is developed on that land doesn't impact the filming that is already going on around there.
And I should just say, the majority of the land, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I think the majority of the land in McCleary is Creatio owned, so city-owned land, right. But there are 2 slivers of private land there that have apparently put forward development plans for the years to come. Yeah. So technically, most of our recommendations apply not to those private pieces of land.
Right.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Or thank you, Magali. Can I get a motion to accept Magali's report? Gail, thank you. Sorry, what was next on the agenda here? Next up on our agenda is staff updates. Throw that over to you, Jessica. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I've got 2 kind of categories of updates this morning. One is on ex-OTO industry pathways. So we have some programs in process right now with C, the E-Trades program, with POV, their PA program, and are supporting a program called Film 101 with the Shine Network Institute. I should mention with C and POV, we're also working closely with the unions on those programs. We're also going to be providing some bursaries through the Black Screen Office for Cinecare's training program coming up, which we're really excited about. In XOTO schools, the students are completing their winter co-op placements now, and there's some upcoming career talks with the TDSB, including a women in film talk at Hot Docs Cinema, next week, and an event with NABIT at the end of the month. So we're at the stage now where we're looking at summer school placements. I will still say we're short on on-set placements, which is really what XOTO Schools wants to be doing. So let me know when you're ready to accept students on set again, because they're really looking forward to that. And the other update is with the LA Mission. Last week, we were in LA. We will submit a full report on this that will be at the next meeting of this board. So Mayor Chow, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Carroll, city staff, and just 40 delegates from studios, education, vendors, service providers, unions and guilds met with over 30 companies last week, including Apple, Netflix, Amazon, Universal, Warner Brothers, et cetera, as well as the MPA companies and an MPA meeting with the mayor. And this culminated in an evening event where over 200 guests were able to network. All in all, the week was a success. We also hosted a breakfast this year on Friday for the unions and guilds to meet with 9 indie producers or smaller producers, which I think was also a great opportunity to have some kind of more intimate conversations. And all 9 of the people who attended are currently looking at Toronto or have already shot here and are really excited about Toronto. Without getting into too much detail, I'd say we heard about the continued need for work in workforce development, sustainability, and continued efforts to support studio growth in Toronto. For production and VFX in particular, a need for databases and ways to find talent in the city. So those are kind of themes that we've been hearing and we continue to hear. But overall, we also heard that the clients really love working in Toronto. They love our talented workforce. They really acknowledge our talented workforce, the quality and variety of studio space, and the livability of the city. What I kept hearing over and over is that we're still, a contender when productions are making their decision for those reasons. So that was encouraging. I think we're heading in the right direction, and we just need to kind of keep really doing what we've been doing. As I said, we'll have a more comprehensive report coming up. And that's it from us.
Thank you, Jessica. I mean, I can just say, obviously, as a delegate on that mission, thank you to Marguerite, yourself, and Colin, and the rest of the folks at the city office for putting that together. And obviously, thank you to the May. Sorry? Oh, sorry.
Just that they couldn't hear that. Thank you.
Sorry.
And I just maybe no.
Thank you to city staff for all their work in putting that together. It was a phenomenal event, phenomenal slate of delegates, slate of meetings, and obviously, first and foremost, though, thank you to the mayor and Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Carroll for taking time out of their busy schedules to obviously let everybody in LA know that film and TV here in Toronto is a key priority and a key industry, and going down there and meeting with folks and pushing that message. So thank you all around.
You're welcome, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say a warm thank you to all of the delegates as well, because obviously we couldn't do any of that work without your incredible support. So really, really appreciate everyone's input for that mission.
I think there'll be a July meeting. We'll really go over it, what the things that bubble up and need to be very much focused on when Marguerite's back. And we're hoping she's having a great time in the Grand Canyon right now. Just well deserved.
Thank you. I guess we need a motion to receive the Jessica's report? Cynthia Clayton, sorry, excuse me. Cynthia Clayton. Oh, I have to vote? All in favor? Sorry. Should know as the union meeting. Apologies. Any opposed? Motion carried. With that, we need to pass a motion to excuse the absence of certain folks. Put that, oh, thank you. There's the motion there. Would anybody like to make that motion? Gail? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
And that,
I'll hand that back to you now.
I think, thank you. Thanks, everybody. That concludes the business for today. Our next meeting, as we heard, July 5th. You'll get something that can be a template for a letter for you for helping the industry thrive and survive in Toronto for City Council next week. And again, thanks to our great staff for a great trip, and we'll talk about that in July. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.